For years, I thought my parents were just overprotective, but they were actually controlling, manipulative, and emotionally abusive. They gaslit me, isolated me from friends, guilt-tripped me into submission, and tried to destroy every bit of independence I found. This is how I finally broke away from their toxic hold. For the longest time, I believed I had a normal family. Sure, my parents were strict, overly involved, always watching, but I figured that just meant they cared more than most. That was a lie I told myself over and over again to make sense of things. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where everything looked perfect. Our grass was cut twice a week. My mom decorated for every holiday like it was a Hallmark movie, and my dad made sure we looked put together whenever we stepped outside. To the neighbors, we were the picture of discipline and togetherness. Behind closed doors, that was a different story. My mom didn't believe in praise. Ever. If I got an A on a test, she'd ask why I didn't get an A+. If I won an award, she'd find a way to mention how someone else probably deserved it more. She never raised her voice, but somehow her disappointment hurt worse than any yelling could have. It was like death by 1,000 sighs. My dad, on the other hand, was more direct. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was always something like, "You're not trying hard enough," or "You'll never make it if you keep being soft." I can't recall a single time he ever said he was proud of me. Not once. They micromanaged everything, from what I wore, to who I could talk to what hobbies I was allowed to have. When I wanted to try out for theater in middle school, my mom laughed and said, "You're not really built for the spotlight, are you?" I was 13. Even then, I started to feel like I wasn't really living my own life. I was just performing the role they cast me in, the obedient, perfect child who never questioned, never disobeyed, and never made them look bad. Looking back now, I realize how deep their control ran. I wasn't allowed sleepovers. I wasn't allowed to walk home from school, even though we lived 2 blocks away. If I didn't answer a text within 5 minutes, I'd get flooded with angry messages or worse. Silent treatment for days. At the time, I told myself it was all out of love, that they were just protective, that maybe I was a problem. I was wrong. So wrong. This wasn't love. This was fear wrapped in a nice suburban bow. And it was just the beginning. By the time I got to high school, I had fully internalized this idea that my only value came from making my parents happy. Or, more accurately, making sure they didn't get upset. It was like I was living in a pressure cooker, and any wrong move could cause it to explode. So I did everything I could to be the perfect kid. Straight A's? Check. Honor roll? Every semester. I didn't party, didn't drink, didn't even stay out past 8 p.m. I avoided dating because my mom said, "No one decent wants someone who's always available." That made 0 sense to me, but I obeyed anyway. I'd watch other kids hang out, laugh, act like teenagers. I envied them, not for what they had, but for the freedom to just be. I didn't even know what I liked. My mom picked my clothes. My dad told me what books I should read. And even my music was censored. If it wasn't classical, it was trash. They didn't just want control. They wanted ownership. I remember one day, junior year, I got accepted into the summer writing program. It was a big deal, competitive and fully funded. I was over the moon. I told my mom, expecting maybe, I don't know, a smile? She frowned and said, "So you want to leave us for a whole summer? What's more important, your family or some silly hobby?" I declined the offer that same night, and that was the moment something inside me started to fracture. It was small at first, but it grew. I began realizing that my life didn't feel like mine. Every goal I chased, every decision I made, none of it was for me. It was all to avoid disappointing them, to keep the peace, to earn crumbs of affection. But no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. My dad barely acknowledged my efforts. My mom compared me to better kids at church, kids whose parents let them live. And yet somehow, I still felt guilty for resenting them. Because that's what toxic parenting does. It teaches you to feel ashamed of your own anger. It convinces you that love has to be earned, and freedom is selfish. I wish I could say I stood up for myself back then, but I didn't. Not yet. At that point, I was still too afraid to imagine a life outside their shadow. But deep down, something had started to shift. I just didn't know it yet. The shift didn't happen overnight. It started slow, quiet, little rebellions, like letting my phone ring without answering immediately, or pretending I forgot to do a chore just to see how they'd react. For most kids, that's normal teenage stuff. For me, it felt like treason. At first, they didn't notice. But when they did, God, it was like I'd lit a match in a room full of gas. My mom started weaponizing guilt the way a surgeon wields a scalpel. She'd go days without speaking to me, then suddenly burst into tears mid-dinner and say things like, "You used to love me. I don't even know who you are anymore." It was never just about what I did. It was about how I was hurting her. Always her. My dad, he got louder. Not physically violent, but the verbal attacks came hard and fast. "You're slipping. You think you're better than us? You're not as smart as you think you are." I could feel the leash tightening the more I tried to pull away. But even with all that, I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not fully. Once you taste even a drop of autonomy, it's hard to pretend you enjoy being a puppet. So I started writing again. In secret. Journals hidden under my mattress. Google Docs with fake names. Stories about people running away. Starting over. Building lives out of ruins. I didn't know it then, but I was writing about me, the version of me I was desperate to become. I began noticing things I'd ignored before, too, like how my mom treated my dad like a weapon she could aim. She'd whisper to him after I left the room. Then suddenly he'd come down hard on me about something completely unrelated. It was like she needed him to be the bad guy so she could stay the victim. They were a team, but not in the healthy, supportive kind of way. They were a unit forged in manipulation and guilt, and I was their favorite project. I kept playing along, for the most part, but inside I was planning, dreaming. I didn't have a full escape route yet, but for the first time in my life, I wanted one, and that feeling was stronger than the fear. You ever have a moment where the curtain lifts just for a second, and you finally see things for what they are? That happened to me one weekend during my senior year. It was a Saturday. I'd been invited to a group study session for AP Chemistry at a classmate's house. Nothing scandalous. Just 4 of us nerds with textbooks and too much caffeine. I actually debated asking for permission, but something in me said, don't give them the power to say no. So I told my mom I'd be out for a few hours. Not where, not with who, just that I'd be home before dinner. She looked up from her magazine and said, "Be careful. There's a lot of people who would love to ruin a girl like you." And that was it. The study session was normal, chill. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I laughed. I asked dumb questions. Someone brought snacks. It felt safe. But the moment I got home, I knew something was off. My dad was waiting in the living room, not saying a word, just sitting there, tapping the armrest with his fingers like a metronome of tension. My mom came in behind me, eyes narrowed. "Where were you really?" I told the truth. Study session. Chemistry. Notes. Snacks. She didn't believe me. My dad started grilling me. What were their names? Were there boys? Did I take the bus or was I alone? It felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. Then my mom dropped the real reason for their anger. "We called your friends, Mom. You weren't there." That's when I realized they'd gone through my phone, my texts, my contacts. Turns out they didn't find that address believable. So they snooped, cross-checked, and even made calls pretending to be me. That moment, that was the first time I said out loud, "You guys don't trust me. You don't even respect me." My dad stood up so fast the chair squeaked. "We don't have to earn your respect. We're your parents." And that right there was it. The foundation. Our house wasn't built on love. It was built on obedience. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just went to my room and locked the door. I laid there all night, not even touching my phone, just staring at the ceiling, thinking, they don't know who I am. They never did, and maybe they never cared to. After that night, something inside me shifted, not a dramatic snap, more like a slow, deliberate click, like a gear falling into place. I started watching them. Not with fear this time, but with detachment. I paid attention to the games, how they manipulated each other, how they both used silence as a weapon, how love always came with a price tag. And I realized they didn't want a daughter. Not really. They wanted a replica, a quiet, polished version of themselves, without the inconvenience of thoughts or dreams of her own. I became good at pretending. Really good. I said, thank you when they bought me clothes I didn't like. I smiled when they made backhanded comments about my weight or the way I styled my hair. I stopped sharing my day, my thoughts, my life. I gave them exactly what they wanted. Compliance. But I was saving up something they never noticed. Independence. While they were busy micromanaging my curfews and flipping out over harmless texts, I was applying to colleges. Out of state. Quietly. Using school computers. I created a Gmail account they didn't know about with all my applications and essays. I even opened a student bank account using birthday money I had stashed over the years. I took out books from the library about student loans, FAFSA, and scholarships. I taught myself what freedom looked like. It gave me a weird kind of strength knowing I had a plan, even if it was far away, even if it wasn't fully formed yet. But at home, things didn't calm down. If anything, they got worse. My mom got moodier. She'd accuse me of keeping secrets just because I wasn't oversharing every second of my life. She'd sulk for hours if I said I was too tired to watch TV with her. And my dad, he started throwing around lines like, "You're turning into one of those ungrateful kids." The truth was, I was turning into something, but not ungrateful, just awake. And once you wake up in a toxic household, there's no going back to sleep. It's strange, the way people who claim to love you can weaponize that love when you stop doing what they want. That spring, I started getting college acceptance letters. Big envelopes. Thick ones. Some from out-of-state universities I never thought I had a shot with. Full ride offers, even. It should have been a celebration. Instead, it felt like planning my escape from a hostage situation. I didn't tell them at first. I just kept the letters tucked between my textbooks. But eventually one came to mail, and my mom got to it before I could. She stormed into my room, waving the envelope like it was a threat. "Ohio? You're not going to Ohio. That's ridiculous. Who do you even think you are?" I tried to explain. Scholarship, good program. I'd be living on campus. But she wasn't hearing any of it. "You want to run off and be one of those girls who ends up pregnant and broke and beg and come home?" she snapped. "You can't even keep your room clean, and now you think you're grown?" My dad didn't say much. He never really did when she was on one of her rants. He just sat there at the edge of the kitchen, arms folded, eyes like glass. But later that night, he came into my room and said the most twisted thing I'd ever heard from him. "We just don't want you to leave and forget us. You'll change. You'll think you're better than us." I stared at him, not even sure what to say. It hit me then. This wasn't about love. It was about control. Their love had a hook in it, and if you tried to pull away, it cut you. I didn't sleep much that week. I started feeling this quiet panic settle in my chest, like they were going to find a way to stop me, cut up my financial aid paperwork, lose my ID, guilt me into staying through teary breakdowns and manipulative guilt trips. So I started scanning copies of everything: school forms, award letters, bank info. I uploaded them to a drive only I had access to. I gave a close friend a USB with everything on it just in case. It sounds dramatic, I know, but when you grow up in a house like mine, you learn that love is just another way to trap you. And I wasn't about to get trapped. Not anymore. I always thought that once I turned 18, things would magically change. Like legally becoming an adult would somehow unlock respect, freedom, a seat at the table. That was a joke. If anything, turning 18 made things worse. My parents didn't see it as a milestone. They saw it as a threat. "You think you're too good for this house now? Don't forget who pays the bills. Adult? Please, you still breathe our air." They weren't losing control. Not really. They just didn't like that I had finally tasted some. One morning, I was headed out for a part-time job interview, something I arranged without telling them. My mom stopped me at the door. She looked me up and down like I was some stranger. Where do you think you're going dressed like that? You're not some working girl on the street. I was wearing a black blouse and dress pants. I told her calmly it was for a job interview. She sneered. Oh, so now you're too good asses for help? You think you're grown now, huh? You think you're independent? I didn't answer. I just walked out, but I cried in the driveway before starting the car. It hit me then, so painfully clear this wasn't parenting. It never had been. This was possession. I wasn't a person to them. I was a thing they controlled, molded, projected their insecurities onto. I got the job. Minimum wage, late hours, nothing glamorous. But I got it, and I didn't tell them right away. That first paycheck felt better than anything they ever gave me. It was mine, not a bribe, not a guilt gift, just mine. Of course, they found out eventually. My mom went ballistic. Working without our permission? What else are you hiding? And there it was. They weren't scared of me making mistakes. They were scared I'd figure out I didn't need them anymore, that I could survive, that maybe I'd be better off without their love. And somewhere deep down, I think they knew I would be. Once they realized they couldn't stop me with shouting or rules, they switched tactics. They went quiet. No more screaming matches, no name-calling. Just silence and guilt. My mom would walk past me in the kitchen without saying a word, making sure I heard the sigh loud enough to echo. My dad would shake his head dramatically any time I mentioned anything about school or work, like I was announcing I had joined a cult. They didn't ground me anymore. They just started playing the victim. You've changed. My mom would say suddenly, like it hurt her. You used to be such a sweet girl. What happened to you? My dad added his own flavor. We sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay us? With secrets and attitude. The truth? They didn't want the real me. They wanted a version of me who never questioned anything. So I stopped talking around them as much, kept my wins to myself, hid my schedules, my friends, my joy. It's wild how being around certain people can make you feel ashamed for growing. Once, after a late shift, I walked into the kitchen and heard my mom on the phone with one of her sisters. She didn't even try to whisper. She's not the same anymore. I think that job's putting ideas in her head. She thinks she's too good for us now. That hit me harder than it should have. Not because it was mean I could handle. It was the way she said it. Like she was mourning a version of me that never really existed. Like my independence was some sort of betrayal. I didn't cry that time. I just stood in the hallway, let her finish, and went to bed. There was nothing left to argue. They didn't want to understand me. They wanted me obedient. And every step I took toward becoming my own person felt like war. It wasn't like I wanted to start a war. I just wanted to be me. But sometimes in a house built on control, pushing back is the only way to breathe. That night, it started small. I was packing a bag, just a few things, getting ready to crash at a friend's place after a shift. My mom walked in, saw the bag, and snapped, "Where do you think you're going?" Running away like a child. I looked at her, tired pretending. "I'm going to my friends. It's none of your business." Her eyes flashed. "You're disrespectful, ungrateful. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." "I'm not a kid anymore." I said, "I don't want your approval. I want to live my life." That's when my dad stepped in, his voice low and cold. "You're throwing away your family for some fantasy." I stared at him. For once, I'm throwing away the things that hurt me. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I saw something in their eyes. Fear, not of losing control, but of losing me. The fight didn't fix everything. Far from it. But it was the first crack in their armor. And in mine, too, because standing up wasn't just about them. It was about me finally standing for myself. After that fight, things got worse before they got better. My mom went full cold shoulder mode, treated me like a ghost in my own home. My dad barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was to remind me how much I was breaking the family. I thought about leaving for good, but I wasn't ready yet. There was still a part of me that hoped maybe, just maybe, things could change. But they didn't. Instead, my parents doubled down on the control, trying to smother every sign of independence like a fire they were desperate to contain. They watched me closely, checked my phone, asked endless questions about friends and plans. Every conversation felt like an interrogation. I felt trapped, more than ever. And yet, even in the darkest moments, I started to notice something else. A small community outside my family, who believed in me, teachers who saw my potential, friends who stood by me, a counselor who listened without judgment. They gave me glimpses of a different life, a life where I wasn't defined by fear or guilt. It wasn't a perfect escape. It was messy, painful, and full of doubt, but it was mine, and that was worth fighting for. After that long, suffocating period, I knew I couldn't wait for things at home to get better. They weren't going to. So I started focusing on me, the parts they tried to crush. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore. Nothing fancy, but it was my first taste of freedom, getting paid for something I actually enjoyed. I stayed late sometimes just to avoid going home. I also applied to colleges far from home. This time, I kept every acceptance letter, every email, locked away on my laptop and in a hidden folder online. No more secrets they could find. I found a few friends who really understood what I was going through, people who had toxic families of their own. We formed this weird little tribe of survivors. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. I also started therapy. The first sessions were brutal. Sitting there, saying out loud all the ways my parents hurt me. It made everything real, but it was also the start of healing. It didn't fix everything overnight. The guilt was still there, heavy as ever. But I was learning to separate their toxic love from the kind of love I deserved. I was learning to stand on my own, and it felt terrifying and amazing all at once. Living on my own, even just for college breaks or weekends with friends, was a mix of relief and guilt. Relief because I finally had space to breathe, to think, to be myself without their constant watchful eyes. Guilt because every time I went back home, it felt like stepping into a trap. The familiar cycle, control and manipulation restarted, and I dreaded it. My parents tried everything to pull me back in. Calls at all hours, veiled threats about family loyalty, and guilt trips that made me question myself. But this time, I had a support system. My therapist helped me recognize the patterns. My friends reminded me I deserved better. And most importantly, I reminded myself daily that my life wasn't theirs to control. It wasn't easy. I stumbled. I called home and cried. I missed the idea of family, even if the reality was painful. But every small victory, whether it was paying my own bills, choosing my own friends, or simply setting boundaries, felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. Breaking away isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 small steps. And I was finally taking them. Even after moving out and setting boundaries, the damage lingered. The voices from my childhood, the silent criticisms, the disappointment, the emotional withdrawal, they didn't just disappear. Some days, I still hear them loud and clear in my head. Days when I feel like I'm not good enough, that I'm still failing, that I'll never be enough for anyone. Therapy taught me that healing isn't about forgetting the past or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about recognizing those old wounds, giving myself permission to feel them, and then choosing to move forward anyway. I started journaling, writing letters to the younger me, the scared kid who just wanted to be loved. I surrounded myself with people who lift me up, who show me what healthy love looks like. I celebrated every small win, every moment I felt proud of myself. It wasn't easy. It's not easy, but slowly I'm learning to believe in myself, to trust my own voice, to know that I deserve happiness and peace. And for the first time in a long time, that feels possible. Healing wasn't just about me. It was about how I connected with others. I had to learn what healthy relationships looked like, how to trust people without fear, how to say no without guilt, how to set boundaries that weren't crossed. Some relationships were easy to fix. Friends who stuck around despite the drama, who showed up when I needed them most. Others, especially with family, were more complicated. I tried reaching out to my parents a few times. Sometimes it felt like progress. Other times, like taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. They still struggled to respect my boundaries, still tried to guilt me, still saw me as a disobedient child. And that was okay, because for the first time, I realized family doesn't have to be blood. It's the people who love you without conditions, who support your growth instead of stifling it. It's the people who see your scars and choose to stay. I'm still figuring it out, still making mistakes. But this time, I'm doing it on my own terms. And that's the greatest freedom I've ever known. Looking back, it's wild to think about how much I survived without even realizing it. Those years living under their control, the endless manipulation, the guilt, the silence. It all shaped me, but it didn't define me. I'm still healing. Some days are harder than others. But I'm no longer just surviving. I'm thriving. I've built a life where I can breathe, laugh, make mistakes, and still feel worthy. I've learned that love isn't about control. It's about respect, trust, and freedom. To anyone out there stuck in a toxic family, feeling like there's no way out, I want you to know it's possible. You're not alone. And no matter how long it takes, you can break free. This story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who needs to hear they deserve better. Thanks for reading.